It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, I'd like to start with you. And, it just seems to me that every 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, there is this cycle where the realities of Medicare and Social Security catch up with both the politicians and the voters. And it seems like we're in the beginning phases of that cycle right now. And this is really tricky territory for any politician. But the facts can't be escaped that these are programs that will constantly need to be maintained to make them sustainable. How do you navigate this world if you're a politician these days?
Well, very good, very good questions. And of course, we're addressing this on the day that President Biden is unveiling his new budget. I know that none of us have had a chance to see it because it hasn't been released, but we can all safely predict that it'll be declared dead on arrival because most presidents' budgets are declared dead on arrival. But in that budget, President Biden is going to have to address this. And apparently he's chosen to address it by raising taxes on people making over $400,000. I think, though, there are some absolute givens that let's just put them on the table. Number one, these social insurance benefit programs of Social Security and Medicare have seen the benefits rise, both by cost of living, but also the baby boom generation is driving up the cost, while at the same time, the revenues that fund these programs have not been growing, partially due to public policy that stopped tax increases, partially due to slower growth in population, fewer people entering the workforce, and we're entering when Al and I joined the workforce. That creates an impossible situation. That creates the inability to continue to fund Social Security and Medicare, rolling into the late, close to 2030 or beyond. And if people remember nothing else from this conversation, remember that if Congress and the president do nothing, these programs will be cut. They automatically get cut, 10%, I think, for Medicare, 20% Social Security. So doing nothing literally reduces the benefits in future years. And what this is all about is how much can we do now to stretch these funds out into the future to prevent significant cuts. You said it well, every several years. Well, I go all the way back to 1981, and sitting in the West Wing of the White House, erstwhile policy people working in President Reagan's administration, of which I was one, decided that we really had to take a hard look at Social Security and Medicare. Documents that were involved in that very closed, small discussion leaked. And Jim Baker, as chief of staff, was livid, one, that there was a leak, but actually he was upset that the policy people were even dealing with this issue leading up to the 1982 congressional elections, because he knew that we were touching the so-called third rail of politics, and that in fact we did suffer losses in 1982. But what the Reagan administration did to recover from this was not step away from the problem, but we asked Alan Greenspan to chair a commission on the reform of Social Security. And the commission included Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a senator then. It included Senator Bob Dole. And these two individuals, along with 20 some others, led by Alan Greenspan, actually started their work at the end of 1981, but really ended up with a proposal by the end of 1982 that became law in 1983. And it was a comprehensive reform of Medicare. I make I say this because I think it's virtually impossible leading into a presidential year to do the things that you have to do. Because the other fact out there, I think, is there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing you can do to solve this problem. You do have to address the age of eligibility. You do have to address the rising benefit structure that exists there. And you do have to address the fact that we stopped increasing taxes on employers and employees some time ago. And that is robbing us of the resources necessary to go forward. So some very clear definition of the problem, but I think the solution is almost going to take either the incumbent president, if he's reelected, or the next president, and probably a commission, frankly, because it also is going to take bipartisan agreement to move anything forward that is meaningful and addresses these problems.
You know, Al, I do want to get your thoughts on this, but I also wanted to bring up the fact that in France right now, they're having some of the worst riots they have ever had because the president there would like to move the retirement age from 62 to 64. So it is not only a third rail, it probably has to come up with another name to show how sensitive this issue is. I mean, what do you think the Democrats need to do?
Well, first of all, the most important rule of politics is that politicians like to give things to people, not take them away. This Social Security and Medicare have been a hot potato forever. As Craig says, they're called the third rail. The 1983 deal was a deal with Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. You had two giants who were able to make a deal and not have members of their party, and probably for O'Neill this was even more important, go crazy. So that, you know, that did work. I want to step back. Craig sort of alluded to this, but let me, CBO just did an estimate that Social Security will be insolvent in 10 years. The trustees say it's going to be in 12, but you get the picture. And as Craig said, the problem is that the benefits are going out faster than the revenues coming in. Social Security is paid for in a sort of pay as you go. Today's workers pay for the retirees, and there just aren't enough workers anymore. The ratio, I just looked at this, it's really incredible. In 1940, which was 5 years after Social Security was created, there were 159.5, I think, workers for every retiree. That was going to build up the trust fund pretty quickly. By 1950, it was 16.5 to 1. But today it's 2.8 and going down. The projections are that by 2050, there'll be 2 workers for every retiree. And if you think about the benefits, I think all 3 of us are probably getting Social Security benefits that we get. 2 workers having to pay for my benefits would be pretty onerous. You really only have a couple of choices. There are 2 or 3 choices. You can raise revenues, you can reduce benefits, or you can means testing. I think actually Nikki Haley is out. I haven't really looked at it carefully, but I think she may have made a speech yesterday on this where she suggested raising the retirement age, which is one way of cutting benefits, and means testing. But I think means testing is not going to get anywhere, because essentially the reason it is the third rail of politics is because it's universal. Everybody gets it. And if you turn it into a welfare program, which was what means tested means, I mean, essentially, because it would mean you eliminate benefits or you cut them sharply for higher income people, you'd probably lose maybe the most important political support, and advocates aren't going to allow that to happen. There are a couple of ways you can raise the revenues. You can raise the rate on businesses and individuals, or you can lift the cap on earnings. I mean, right now, I'm not sure what the exact number is, but there's a point 100 and somewhere around $110,000, $120,000. If you make more than that, it's not taxed. You know, I suspect that the most likely thing will be to raise that cap. And the easiest way, of course, to cut benefits is just to raise the retirement age. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, but that 1983 deal had a sliding scale for increasing the retirement age. There's another possibility, and incidentally, I've always been an advocate of reforming entitlements to save them and sustain them. And it's probably 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe even a little longer. Bill Brock, former Republican senator, the late Bill Brock, my friend, and I did an op-ed suggesting that we eliminate the payroll tax, which is the tax you that now goes to pay for Social Security, and replace it. We didn't go into a lot of detail. I personally believe that maybe something like a value-added tax or some sort of environmental tax. But the problem is you got to raise a lot of revenue to replace the payroll tax. And so those things are probably not very likely. Having said all that, nothing's going to happen in the next 2 years, period. President Biden basically took the issue off the table, and Senator Scott, Republican Senator Scott, stuck out the Republican jaw on that and got whacked and got knocked on all fours. And so the Republicans aren't going to want to have that, no matter if Nikki Haley or anybody else tries to bring it up in the primaries, because I think it, you know, it's a way for Nikki Haley. I'm sure she sees it as a way to make the generational issue more vivid, but it's not going to go anywhere. My guess is that the time we'll see this happen, and maybe we'll do it the way Craig suggested with the commission, will be in 2025, because then you'll have either a lame duck president who won't have to worry about his reelection, or a president who will be in the first 2 years of what he or she hopes will be an 8-year term. So I think that's when we'll see action.
You know, Craig, I guess we'll be talking about this for some time, but I do want to talk about the exit of Larry Hogan as a contender for the Republican nomination for president. I think a lot of Marylanders, maybe you were included, had high hopes that Larry Hogan might save the Republican Party, but he has said, as of a couple of days ago, that he has no intention of running. What's your thoughts?
You know, well, if it ever fell to me to tap a handful of people to seek the presidency because of a strong record on the Republican side, Larry Hogan would certainly be among them. Here's somebody who worked across party lines. He has a state that's doing actually quite well in many ways, and he found a way to bring people together that's I think admirable. So I am saddened to see him withdraw. I have no special insight into why he reached that conclusion. As we've said before here, that running for the presidency is a very arduous, all-in kind of activity for these individuals. It's kind of, you know, we think it's a long ways away. On the other hand, we're sitting here in March and we'll be facing primaries, presidential primaries, a year from now. So there was a lot of groundwork to be laid. I'm assuming he didn't see a path there. Although I actually would say to those considering it, you know, you need to be able to raise money. You need to have a respectable campaign, but the path forward is not always clear until you get out there. And Hogan has a record that I think is just more substantial than others. And hopefully he will find a way to continue serving either in business or another government activity. but I do think we lost one of the stronger players. I think part of the rationale is one that I'm certainly supportive of, and that is you don't want to have so many people running in the Republican primary that a declining percentage for this former president, Donald Trump, becomes sufficient to win primaries. And I think Hogan looked at that and felt that maybe he would step away so that others would have the chance. But we frankly need more people like Larry Hogan at high levels of government, and so I hope he finds a path forward for himself that's rewarding. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the job he did as governor of Maryland.
You know, Al, I should say right up front that you, from the get-go, were saying that you didn't think that Hogan had a pathway, but it does kind of wrap this whole story up to get to your thoughts.
Well, like Craig, I'd like to have a good Republican nominee, and because the country needs it. While I agree with his point that we don't want to have so many Republican candidates in the primaries that Trump can win with a small percentage of the electorate, I want to have at least one good one in that primary to go up 1-to-1 against him. But I felt that Larry Hogan basically has had three problems in running. One is he didn't have a path. I mean, at least not as a Republican, because 80% of the Republican Party now or more is really conservative, and he's sort of a moderate. He's sort of a traditional conservative, which today is a moderate, so the question was, by path, I mean, where's he going to get his voters in the primaries? And I just didn't see it. The second thing is, I don't think he really had a base. Who are the people who are going to fall on their swords for Larry Hogan? They're sort of practical people who want a practical candidate, but those aren't the kind of people that really give you impetus in a primary race. And third, I don't think he had a cause. Maybe saving the Republican Party, but it's a party that doesn't want to be saved, and which is a pretty big problem. To be honest with you, I wish Hogan had sort of looked at what we did in 1989 to 92. I think that if he was serious about wanting to run for president, what I think he should have done, and probably should have started it early last year, maybe even the year before, right after the 2020 election, I think he should have gone to the governors and around the country and put together an effort to define a Republican agenda for the future, for a party that had no platform in 2020 and ran on nothing in 2022. And I think if he had done that and they'd come up with 2 or 3 ideas, and you had people, governors around the country supporting it, and Hogan was the natural leader of those Republican governors. He was head of the National Governors Conference for a while. Maybe he would have had a cause, and he would have had at least a political infrastructure of a base support. And it would still been very long shot, but at least I think he would have had a chance. But in today's world, as we look at candidates, say, are they good people or not? And, do you like them or not? But I really think if you're going to try to be a long shot candidate for president, you need more than personal qualities. You need a cause, and you need to define that cause. And I just don't think he ever did it.
Hey, Dave, I just do want to remind us that back in 1980, there was a candidate who withdrew, George H.W. Bush, went on to become vice president and then president. So you never know. You can't cut any of these people out.
Good point, good point. We have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.